This is ContraZoom, where we go back and forth about film. I'm your host, Dakota Arsenault. On today's episode, we are wrapping up the Seattle International Film Festival, which just celebrated its 50th year, or as they are marketing it as, the Siftiest? Siftiest? Hashtag Sifty?
Hashtag Sifty.
Hashtag Sifty. And joining me today is Thomas Stoneham-Judge, who is the owner and editor at For Real, and he's also one of the co-founders of the Cascadia Film and Television Critics Association. It's been a while since you've been on the podcast, but welcome back to the show, Thomas. How are you doing?
I'm good. It has been a minute, but I'm glad that SIFF is our opportunity to reconnect in person, actually. So this is awesome.
In person, yes. So this is a in-person podcast, so I don't know if the audio is going to be a little bit different or not. We're going to see. I don't have the magic of the studio, aka my bedroom.
Right.
But yeah, it's been a while since I've done a live podcast. I think the only time I ever do them, two microphones plugged in, is when I'm with Stephanie, and otherwise it's all virtually.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad we could do this. This is really exciting. Now, I'm curious, before we get into the movies that we want to talk about, I've never covered SIFF before.
Mm-hmm.
You're a veteran. You're from Washington State.
Yes.
So this is your home turf.
Yeah.
I want to know, what's your sort of history with the festival? How many years have you been covering it? What did you think of this year? All that fun stuff.
That's actually a really great question because I get to go way back on this. So I've been doing my website since right before the pandemic. And at that point, before the pandemic, I was just an attendee of SIFF. And I think it must have been about 8 or 9 years ago when I first attended SIFF. Because back then I wasn't familiar with film festivals at all. I knew it was happening and I just assumed it was this thing that rich people did and it costs a whole lot of money to participate in. But I remember looking up tickets and being like, you can buy a ticket to a film festival? What? Well, let's do that. And so I remember that year attending and just getting lost in the atmosphere of a film festival. And shortly after that, later on in the year, I went to the VIFF and got to experience the Vancouver Film Festival. And I've kind of been a junkie ever since. But as far as covering SIFF officially as press, I've been doing it since the pandemic, when everything was virtual.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of my foot in the door for film festivals in general. But no, it's been great. I've made so many awesome connections here at SIFF, and have made a lot of great friends because of film festivals and SIFF. This is me being Washington based. This is my home turf, my home base film festival, and so it's always nice to get out and support this festival and what it's doing for programming and bringing excellent films to the Seattle area.
Nice. Well, that's very exciting. It's so funny that you talk about this concept of the film festival being, something for the rich and for the elite. I'm from Toronto, as everyone knows, and TIFF is a bit of a different beast. And so it really does sort of feel that yeah, you could go, but you could go for one movie.
I think you're right. Maybe when the general public thinks of film festivals, they naturally think of Sundance, TIFF,
Mm-hmm.
and even overseas festivals like Venice and Cannes. And they can be elite things to go to. Very hard to get tickets,
Mm-hmm.
and they're a little pricier. And so, yeah, SIFF exists in more of a approachable space. Tickets are, I think, $16 a ticket, which is not bad for a film festival. And like I said, you can either get one ticket, you can get a pack of tickets, you can get a pass. There's so much flexibility with how engaged you want to be with the festival. And they also put on really great events. Opening night and closing night has been, have had really great films, over the past years that I've been, covering it. So yeah, there's just a lot to engage with SIFF. And yeah, it's, for anyone who's thought about attending a festival and you happen to be here in the Pacific Northwest, SIFF is absolutely a great festival to really dip your toe into what this whole atmosphere is like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll say from my perspective, I've been out in Vancouver now for 3 years. This is the first time I've covered it, and I've looked at it in the past, maybe oh yeah, maybe. And I think now that I've been in Vancouver a few years and I've traveled down to Seattle a bunch of times, it's one of those things where it's oh yeah, it's just Seattle. It's not that difficult. I imagine for you going up to Vancouver, it's it's not that difficult.
I'm in a very unique position where I live almost exactly between the two.
Yes.
And so being in Bellingham, it's just really close to the border, so I can pop up to Vancouver when it's happening, and it's an hour trip up there, a little more than an hour trip up there for SIFF. It's a little more than an hour trip down here, and so it's one of the reasons whenever I think about about like, where else would I live if I was to move? I just can't, because where else am I going to live in between two awesome film festivals like this? So
yeah, you're pretty fortunate in that regards for sure.
yeah.
For me, for this festival, it was interesting because I only came down for the last weekend. So by the time you're listening to this, I came down for the Saturday and the Sunday, the last 2 days of the festival. And then otherwise, I was trying to do it virtually, watching some screeners. Hot Docs had just finished, so I was very wrapped up in Hot Docs. And you listened to the last episode, did a lot of work with that. But it was pretty interesting because they send out a document of like all the screeners that are available. It's like 150 movies that are playing, and like 100 of them had screeners. I was like, oh, I can just watch whatever I want like this. Okay. You're trusting me?
I really do appreciate the access that SIFF tries to get its press its press members, because festivals they're tough. They're a lot of work. They're a lot of grind, and very time consuming. And so when we're able to have the access to screeners and being able to watch them more on demand, it just gives us so much more flexibility to cover more films and to see more films. And it's an invaluable benefit for us as press.
Yeah. I'll say this. I don't know if it's supposed to be a negative or not from my perspective, but I will say from my perspective, I had seen quite a few of the movies that already are playing at this festival, stuff that's been playing at VIFF last year. I saw something that was at Hot Docs last year that's just playing here now. I'm just here for the ride, the one about the Vancouver Canucks riot that happened. I saw that 13 months ago almost, and it's just playing this festival now. So like, I'm sure it's great that the people of Seattle in the surrounding PNW area are able to get access to these movies that, play the festival circuit. But sometimes, and I'm not trying to rag on the festival, but it's a little bit like, oh, I've already seen 10 movies from this festival. Most of them I didn't watch during this festival.
I'm in the same boat as you. I travel to festivals like TIFF and Sundance and of course Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of films that played here at SIFF that I had seen at other festivals. And I think that contributes to, kind of what I was saying with SIFF bringing great film to Pacific Northwest. And it's cool to see that there is such a diverse selection of films that have kind of made their way through the film festival circuit over the last 12, 14 months, and that are finally getting to Seattle. And it's opportunity for Seattle audiences to see movies that we already know
Mm-hmm.
are worth checking out. And so I've been excited about that. A number of films that I've seen at VIFF and other festivals that I'm just like, oh, I'm really excited for more people to see that and
Mm-hmm.
for that to now have a presence here in Seattle. So yeah, I see what you're saying. I think as press, it's kind of a double-edged sword where it's like, oh, it would be nice to have more programming that we haven't been exposed to, but also now those are films that we've covered. Maybe we can get extra exposure on the coverage that we've had and are able to check out other films, or maybe take a chance on films that we hadn't heard about, because again, you just mentioned there's so many movies that SIFF programs during these 10 days. There's always something new to check out.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be linking to a couple reviews that were originally written a while ago that I'll be able to relink now.
There you go. Opportunity.
And then I think the last thing I'll say about the festival is I hadn't gone to any of the theaters in Seattle before, and I went to a screening at the Egyptian and at Cinema Uptown, and I have to say both are really great theaters, especially the Egyptian. Oh man, what a beautiful theater that is.
Staple theaters here in Seattle. It was really cool. It's really awesome what SIFF is doing for the cinema experience here in Seattle, because SIFF is really great about preservation.
Mm-hmm.
I was here when they announced the purchase of the SIFF Egyptian Theater back when that was under threat of being torn down or being removed from the community. And so I was here when that announcement was made. I was an attendee at that time. and then I was also here last year when they acquired the old Cinerama downtown, which is now SIFF Cinema downtown. And so it's been really cool seeing SIFF kind of expand in this way where they're preserving, really like cultural icons of theaters here in the Seattle area, and then just making them awesome venues to watch films in.
Yeah. The Egyptian is like a theater that you would see in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that Tarantino would glamorize. Like I was so impressed. I walked in, I was like, wow, this is what you expect from a beautiful old theater that's got very intricate artwork and it's got all these beautiful old posters up on the wall. They're just like, yes, cinema. I love it.
And all the Egyptian theming on the inside. It's classic. It's so great.
All right. So I guess enough about our preamble here. We are going to each talk about 3 movies that we saw during the festival that we want to highlight. I guess maybe one of mine isn't so much a highlight, more one I just want to discuss a little bit. But 3 movies each we want to talk about. I don't know if you'd seen any of my movies that we're going to talk about. I have not seen any of yours. So I can't really chime in for that.
This is a great educational opportunity. We're going to share movies that maybe we should be checking out.
I love it. Okay. So I'll go first. The first one that I saw was the one that I saw in person at the Egyptian, and that was Dìdi, the new Sean Wang film that played at Sundance and was a big hit there and looks like it might be an early Oscar potential favorite for next year.
I mean, Sean Wang is an Oscar nominee.
He is.
So like he already has that going for him. That guy's career, man. I remember when Dìdi was announced for Sundance at the same time that his short film was it had been picked up by Disney. And then the announcement of his film at Sundance and then the nomination of his short film at the Oscars. Like that kid is riding high.
Yeah.
He is just propelling his career right now, and that's great. I'm so happy to see this young filmmaker do such great things. And Dìdi, I did get the chance to see Dìdi during Sundance, and all that nostalgia.
Yeah,
all of that nostalgia. It's a really fun one, especially for people who happen to be a part of that era.
Yeah. So if you're not familiar with the movie, it is a semi-autobiographical film about a young boy named Chris Wang. Very similar last name, you might notice, where it's basically just the summer between grade 8 and grade 9, and what it's like growing up. I almost want to, compare it to something like 8th grade, but for boys. And I saw so much of myself in Chris's character, this idea of trying to figure out where you fit in, your friends, and you can kind of poke fun of each other, but maybe it actually kind of hurts you a little bit when your friend makes fun of you and you don't know what to do and you start meeting other people and you're like, maybe do I want to be friends with them or what's going on? And he has this relationship with his older sister that I thought was just so beautiful. And there's a moment in the film where they've been bullying each other nonstop, including something extremely disgusting that can only be classified as biological warfare between siblings. And she's about to go off to college, and they kind of got in a truce, and she like awkwardly gives him a hug, and he doesn't know what to do. And just like my heart just melted, and like I started tearing up a bit. I'm just like, oh, okay. They're going to be all right. You know what? Like their siblings are fight. Anyone that has siblings, they know that feeling, but you know what? They'll be okay. They'll be okay.
It is so interesting how many of those. So like there's the physical nostalgia of the film, right? The 90s kind of like aesthetic and everything. But there's also that emotional nostalgia, right? Like you're talking about that sibling rivalry thing that's happening there. And also the social dynamics. Where do you fit in at that age? How, you have your friend group, but what happens when that starts evolving and maybe, you start gravitating towards a different friend group. There's so much about that that's so relatable to that era and that very impressionable time of life. I definitely enjoyed all of that about the film. I will say, so I had the opportunity, there's another filmmaker here who debuted her debut short film called I Think I'd Like to Stay, but she's a costume designer and she was a costume designer for Dìdi. And so I got to chat with her for a few minutes about her work on costume designing that, which is immensely fun because I hate referring to it as a period piece.
2008 is a period now. Yes.
So like that era of time, how did she like capture that that aesthetic, I guess, and that vibe with the costumes. And so she was talking about like talking with Sean and him trusting her with that vision, and her going through a bunch of like photo albums and it's not photo album, but yearbooks, and just like really crafting that. And I think, you know, that particular part of the film just helped solidify that aesthetic and solidify us being in that era.
It's so funny. I would love to maybe talk to someone who's like maybe a teenager now or something like that and just be like, what do you think of the costumes from this movie? Because for me, it didn't look like a period piece. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember when I dressed like that. Me and my friends, we dressed like that, you know, nothing about it was unusual, but like, it clearly is. This is a movie that takes place almost 15 years ago, and styles have changed and looks have changed. And so there has to be an element of this is dated, quote unquote. So I'd be very curious to see, because I didn't even clock that. I didn't even clock that. It's like, oh yeah, it's 2008. That's just how we dress.
It's so natural to us, right? Especially like in the moments when they're like chatting on online. It's not the same kind of chat that we do now. It's archaic now, but like it's so familiar. Like, oh yeah, I remember when that was the way to communicate.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's what's was really I think the best part of craft aspects of film is when it's so well done that you don't notice it.
It almost feels a bit like how Boyhood was filmed over 12 years. So every year was capturing the technology and the looks and the music and the pop culture of that moment. So it was never dated because he was doing it in real time. But you look back and you're like, oh man, you remember those big chunky Apple computers where they were like translucent blue, and they have that in the movie? You're like, oh wow, that was so weird. That's kind of the feeling of that, where you're looking at that and you're just like, oh yeah, that's dated technology.
It's dated technology.
Oh
it's
God,
dated
I'm so old.
fashion. It's dated, like there's but it's so well done and so natural in this film, and that's again where all that nostalgia comes from, is really just how this film is crafted and how naturally all that is incorporated into the story.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say on it is, it's one of those movies where I'm glad I was able to see it with a large crowd, because it was a very vocal crowd, which was really cool. And, you know, anytime something was happening, like especially the AOL chat, anytime he like starts to type something and then like delete or whatever, there would like be an audible gasp or something. And there's a moment in the film, I'm not going to talk too much about what it was, but he's talking with a female friend, and they had a bit of a falling out, and he does something while he's chatting with her, and the whole crowd had this like heartbroken groan.
Right.
And I was like, it just made that moment even more touching and hilarious and impactful. And so it was really cool. And Sean Wang, the director, was there along with the costume designer that you said you interviewed. She was present, and one of the child actors, because he was from Seattle. So that was really cool.
They had Sean in town?
Oh yeah.
What?
Yep.
He was not on the interview list.
He came up and did an introduction and an talked about it afterwards, and once again affirming that all film festival Q&As are the worst. The worst. Why? The people that shoot their hands up, they just always have the dumbest questions.
Just don't even get me started on this. I wasn't at your Q&A, but I've been at Q&As, and I just, if any film festival programmers are out there, can we just turn off audience questioning? Y'all want to ask a question? Be a journalist.
Yeah.
Because even when I was in Toronto or at Sundance, like like these massive film festivals, you can ask really, really like insightful questions. This is like the opportunity to do that, and you just don't.
Yeah.
And that's why we do or at least I do what I do, is like, that's a really great opportunity to dig deeper into, filmmaking and ask really deep questions. But Q&As are not a great time to do that. I think they're great times for that, to hear a little bit of behind the scenes from the filmmaking team, to maybe get a story or two in. And that's it. I just cannot think of a time when audience the audience portion of Q&As was like exceptional.
No, they did, I think, 4 questions with one of them just being a compliment.
Yeah.
And one of them mostly being a compliment with a very weird question at the end. But it was all bad.
I'm just a very quick deviation. So I was in Toronto, and we were at the premiere screening of A Zone of Interest. And they said, we're going to go to the audience for questions. Please keep compliments to yourself. We know you like the movie. And the very first person they chose stood up and said, I just wanted to say I really love your film. Bro, didn't we already set the ground rules?
Yeah.
And so the moderator had to say, yes, thank you for the compliment. Now, what's your question? And then he had a question that really didn't matter. So like, he asked a question about something that Jonathan Glazer had already addressed in his talking before the audience. So,
of course.
Like,
of course.
Please, if there's ever a time when you are offered the opportunity to ask a question, just please make sure it's something that everybody in the audience cares about.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
Okay. There's I digress. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Well, continue your soapbox because I want to hear about the first movie you want to talk about.
Yeah. So the first movie I want to talk about is a film that I hadn't heard about before it was programmed at the festival, but I was looking through when the schedule was announced and I was looking through, it caught my attention because it's a style of animation that I almost always love. And the film is called The Missing. It's from director Carl Joseph Papa. It's a Filipino animated film. And I guess the synopsis just reads, in this mix of rotoscoped and hand-drawn animation, a mute gay animator sent to check in on his missing uncle encounters the alien who stole his mouth as a child. Yeah, I read that synopsis and was like, I'm in. How do I see this film? So I was able to watch it and I liked it so much that I then, the director wasn't able to attend the festival, but I reached out to the director and was like, yo, let's get an interview on this film because it was a good one. And because the director, he's in the Philippines and there's a 13-hour difference between the West Coast and the Philippines. And so I got to do that interview at like 1 a.m.
Oh boy.
It was a long night, but so worth it. That, you can actually find that interview on our, For Real YouTube page, but ultimately, like it's quite the journey through this main character's exploration of like trying to understand himself and trauma that he had gone through. And I think that it's a very powerful film. And I like the way that it's presented. It actually bounces between two styles of animation. There's the rotoscoped animation, again, that I really appreciate, but there's also this kind of like rudimentary hand-drawn kind of animation that it bounces back and forth between. And it makes sense why it does that when you watch the film. But and then there's also parts where like portions of the animation is missing and you just get that checkered white and gray background like you see on Photoshop, because things are just like missing from these particular scenes.
Yeah.
So very, very creative presentation of this film and very heartwarming. And it also co-stars Dolly De Leon, who anyone who saw Triangle of Sadness is familiar with her, but she's also here, or not here, but she also has another film here at the festival called Ghost Light. So she's getting some work in, but I loved her role in this film as well. I love her as an actress. And yeah, so I strongly recommend checking out The Missing for whenever you get the opportunity.
Yeah, we actually ran a review of that movie, I think about 4 or 5 months ago, and Paulo Bautista reviewed it for the website. And I will say your interview with the director is going to be the most popular thing on your website for a very long time. Every month since it's been posted, it's been our number one content on the website with about 400 to 500 hits.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. You're going to do numbers. Yeah.
I appreciate that traffic. Hopefully, your audience now rushes to my video to see
Well,
it.
Paulo is Filipino, and so he's able to infuse a little bit of his knowledge of the Philippines, and you could tell the traffic meter from the Philippines shoots right up. So tapping into that market, I'm definitely make sure to share your interview, but you're gonna get some great numbers from that.
Well, I appreciate that insight. Thank you. No, and it was really a good conversation. Carl is just such an easy person to chat with, and he was so passionate about talking about this film. Of course, he put a lot of time and effort into it, and talking about animators and animation in the Philippines and how difficult it is to get a project like this, off the ground, much less to the States and into festivals and stuff. So, anyway.
It was the Philippines' official submission at the Oscars last year for Best International Film. So it's nice that it's still finding an audience for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we'll move on to, I guess, my next film, which is a movie that I just watched today at the time of this recording, and that's called Tiger Stripes, and it was directed by Amanda Nell Yu. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly there, Amanda. But the brief synopsis is an 11-year-old girl who is carefree until she starts to experience horrifying physical changes to her body. Yes, that is a bit of a accurate description, but not really. It's this young girl at school, and right at the beginning of the movie, she gets her period for the first time, and it's kind of a comedy, and then it slowly kind of turns into a bit of a mix between a body horror with lots of really interesting mythology that I'm sure the film is absolutely chock to the brim with, that I have no idea about. And I literally just came from the screening, and I kind of just want to read more about it to learn what this symbolism all is. But basically, the movie is Tiger Stripes, so I'm not going to you can only hide so much about it when the movie is called that. But basically, it's an analogy of a young girl going through puberty. I would consider it something, similar to Carrie or something like that. Or if, did you see a movie a couple years ago called The Fits from Anna Rose Holmer?
No, I didn't.
No. Okay. So there's about this, similar age group of girls, of like preteen girls, early teen girls. And they're like in this dance troupe, and, as an analogy for them starting puberty, they start getting these seizures and they can't figure out what's going on. And so it's sort of got this like kind of horror aspect to it. And it's very similar to what's going on in Tiger Stripes here, where, she starts convulsing and then some of her hair is coming out, but then she's also getting like hair on her upper lip at the same time. The movie's called Tiger Stripes. You can sort of imagine maybe what she might be changing into a little bit when I'm saying body horror and things like that. But I would sort of consider it a cross between maybe something like Carrie, where you have this aspect of a young girl going through her period for the first time, with maybe something like The Fly with the body horror. There's a couple very stomach churning moments where people in the audience, it's funny, I saw it, they showed a brief trailer for it before Dìdi when I saw that, and so I knew it because they showed one of the grosser moments in the trailer, and so I recognized I was about to show up, and so I started watching the audience and seeing everyone covering their eyes and squirming in their seats was quite delightful, but also it was still very disgusting to watch again on screen. But it was a fantastic film. It was funny all the way through, and there's a little bit of this element of the weird, the controlling aspects of being Muslim and this male dominated society and what their restrictions are on women and things like that. It works very interesting because as this young girl's body is going through all these changes and things like that, we see that when she's at home, when she takes off her coverings, but because she lives in Malaysia where it's a Muslim predominant country, she's able to cover her body up completely. And at one point she wears long gloves because her hands start getting scabby and things like that. And so it's just like, oh, it's very interesting because you can kind of have a horror movie centered around this, but the fact is she's going through all these bodily changes and is able to completely hide them from everyone because she can just hide it under the guise of her religious coverings, which I just thought was very fascinating to look at, and a great way to sort of show these transformations without, the awkward way of like, oh, I got to pull down my sleeve, or is that a hickey on my neck? Oh no, I got to cover it up, or whatever it is that you have to sort of invent when you are not when you don't have that as a convenient way to move your story forward, which was very interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. I have not seen this one yet, but I have heard great things, and so I'm happy that you're able to catch it here at SIFF.
Yeah, a nice combination of funny, scary, interesting, a lot of really unique filmmaking touches. At one point, she starts climbing trees, and they basically use stop motion to do it, which was a little bit of a giggle from the audience, but it worked great because, like, sometimes, you know, filmmakers on a budget try to do too much to convince you of the world that you are in, and it just ends up looking cheesy or bad or not believable. The CGI doesn't work or whatever. Camera angles, you're trying to hide things, just doesn't work. Sometimes the best option is just be like, no, you know what? We don't have a $5-10 million budget. We're working on a real budget here. And so we're just going to stop motion her climbing up a tree, and it works.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome. This was also Malaysia's submission for Best International Film. So
it was.
We're just hitting all the international film submissions. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's clearly quite a bit of interesting mythology going on and stuff with this. Like, there's a story of women or some creature sitting in trees with their glowing eyes watching you, and if you see them, you know, bad luck or bad things are going to happen to you. And so we see this a few times, and it's not really explained, but I'd love to learn more about this. This has to be something that's based in some sort of, you know, tradition or story from Malaysia that I don't know about, but I need to know more about it now.
You are selling me on this film.
Yeah.
I've heard good things about it, but I haven't had this level of depth of conversation about it. And so, like, yeah, I got to go find where to watch it now.
Excellent. Okay. What's your next film then, Thomas?
All right, my next film. We're deep into foreign language films right now.
Let's do it. I love it.
I'm gonna pick another foreign language film, and this one was under the radar even here at SIFF. But it's called Terrestrial Verses. It's an Iranian film from director Ali Raza Khat. I'm going to read the description because it's interesting. The description says, in this absurdist, formally inventive, Iranian film, formally inventive Iranian film structured around 9 vignettes, a cross-section of Tehran society, fathers, filmmakers, schoolgirls, rideshare drivers, is interrogated by various off-screen authority figures and bureaucrats intent on making their lives harder. I don't know necessarily what drove me to watch this film, but it was certainly something that I gravitated to. And essentially it really is just 9 short films. And every short film has just a single shot with the main character in frame and these authority figures outside of frame interrogating the main character. So it's all the same form for all 9 stories. But it's so egregious how, the discrimination and the homophobia and the, like, all these just like transgressions on these people's, lives and identities because they're authority figures. And so I find it interesting that the synopsis uses the word absurdist because it's not absurdist in like a way that is, unbelievable. It's absurdist in how outrageous it gets, yes. Right? Like, it's so outrageous, but also so believable. And so, like, I don't know how to explain it. You just have to watch it. Like, they're just, like I said, a bunch of short films. And so each segment is easy enough to watch through until the transgressions on these people's lives starts ramping up and getting more and more egregious. And there are multiple times in this movie where I threw my hands up like, you can't be serious, right? That's how you're treating this person. Yeah. That's what you're doing. I can see the aggravation in this main character, but now you're aggravating me and I'm not even the subject, But I mean, obviously I think that it takes these social issues in Tehran to an extreme to kind of make a point about how difficult things can be for people, in certain situations. And so it's an aggravating kind of film. It's not easy to watch if you get frustrated by societal issues, social issues real easily. But I thought it was very well done. I love one take shots. I love one take sequences, and all 9 of these stories are just one takes of these conversations, these one-on-one conversations, which is another thing I like. One setting, 2 characters, very minimal kind of productions. And you're just kind of along for the ride in these conversations and just getting more and more aggravated. I'll give an example of one of the stories, and it's the first one, where a father is, I guess, registering the name of their new baby, and he wants it to be a particular name, but the clerk is saying he can't choose that name. What do you mean you can't choose that name? I want this name. Oh, well, that's not a very traditional name. Well, what does it matter to you? I want this name. Well, we can't allow that. What do you mean you can't allow it? Please do this name. And so it's this short film of them going back and forth about naming this guy's child. And the clerk gives suggestions like, oh, well, isn't such and such a better name? That is entirely irrelevant. I want this name. And me, I don't know, maybe I just, live in a culture where this is that is absurd, right? But there's places in the world where that's an issue. And so that's just one example, of like how, the kind of frustrating situations these are. But I do recommend it as a very well-made film.
And so I'm curious, you say that like it's structured as interview, so it's just literally someone telling this, like recounting a story?
Not necessarily. Let me clarify. When I say interview, I guess what I mean is just like one-on-one conversations. A lot of these conversations are a subject in a particular situation, and then an authority figure who has to determine how they go through this situation. So there are literal interviews in here, like someone's applying for a job. And so that's a one-on-one interview. Actually, a couple people in the vignettes are applying for jobs. And so they are being interviewed for the job. But then there are other situations like the one that I just explained, where it's 2 people having a conversation and the authority figure just being a jerk. And interview and I guess conversation might be a better term in that way, where the subject is being subjected to very unfair conditions by this off-screen authority figure who is really just overstepping their bounds on what is appropriate in those conversations. So
yeah, that's really fascinating. It sounds like it's basically just someone trying to live their life, do their thing, but they're encountering the physical embodiment of a roadblock.
Yes, that's literally exactly what this is. Every single one of these situations, and they all have their own unique scenarios. So each one is just a different type of roadblock that this authority figure is just gatekeeping something or is imposing too much, or making the subject uncomfortable, and the subject has to figure out how to navigate this because they're in a position of vulnerability. I'm getting aggravated talking about this movie, but that's what's so good about it. That's what I love about it. It really elicits emotion. And again, that word absurdist comes up in my and is a very interesting way to explain this, because it gets me absurdly upset.
Multiple definitions of the word. Yes. Interesting. Yeah, that's really fascinating. You said that you want to talk about this movie, and I was like, I don't even remember seeing it when I was scrolling through SIFF's program schedule. So I'm glad you brought this one up.
Yeah. I absolutely recommend it.
Excellent. So I imagine then, because it's, sort of 9 vignettes, they're all sort of fairly short. I'm guessing like under 10 minutes each sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very, I would actually call it more of a shorts program.
Yeah. Just with an overlying theme.
With the overlying theme, overlying style, everything is cohesive, and it's like the same type of short film, but over different scenarios. And so, each scenario is just about a different person.
Interesting. Okay. Very cool. I guess the next one that I want to talk about is one that I actually wrote a review about. It's called Hitchcock's pro-Nazi film. And one of the nice things about when you're covering film festivals is you're looking for titles. Like I said, there's like 150 movies playing here, and you're just like, okay, I don't know most of these. There's only so many people I'm aware of in the world of cinema. So sometimes you just have to be grabbed by a title. And when you hear a title like Hitchcock's pro-Nazi film, you're like, oh, okay. okay, that's got my attention now. As everyone knows, I'm a huge Alfred Hitchcock fan. I collect his movies. I've seen over 30 of them. I'm trying to see them all. He has about 60 movies, so I'm about halfway there. And it's basically just like the more and more obscure ones that I haven't seen. And I was like, I don't really remember him directing a pro-Nazi film. What the hell is this all about? And so what this documentary is about, it's examining whether or not his movie Lifeboat from 1944 was a pro-Nazi film or not. And if you've never seen the movie Lifeboat, basically what it is there's a merchant ship that gets attacked by a German U-boat, and so they sink, and a bunch of the survivors end up getting into a lifeboat, and they're looking for more survivors, and if they see anyone, they pull them in and try to help them whatever way they can, and they end up pulling this one man up, and it turns out he was the captain of the U-boat. And so then it becomes a bit of an intrigue where he's the most experienced sailor of all of them, and whether or not they can trust him, or he says that he can help get them to safety, things like that. They have to debate this as a group, and Hitchcock wanted it to sort of be the rest of the boat be an embodiment of America. So you're having people of different professions, from different backgrounds, all this sort of stuff to sort of highlight the microcosm of America in the war and what they were doing to fight against Germany. And you get this documentary that basically it's an hour and a half, and it basically takes until the hour mark to actually get to the thesis of this title. It spends the whole hour kind of talking about Hitchcock moving to America and wanting to set up and be working in there because he knows that he can make more money and have bigger audiences doing American films as opposed to back in his homeland in England, and whether or not he was doing enough to help with the war effort at the time and all that sort of stuff that's going on. And you're getting all this. And then finally, we're getting to whether or not it was considered a pro-Nazi film. And basically it boiled down to there were some critics that believed that he was too nice to the German character. This is a character that they spend most of the movie distrusting. And when they find out that he kills one of the Americans on the boat in the middle of the night by pushing him overboard because he's dying of thirst, that they beat him to death and throw him overboard. And that apparently...
That doesn't scream pro-Nazi to you?
Yeah. And the rationale that they were kind of going for is at the time, because Germany was, such an imposing force on the world and the destruction that Nazi Germany was doing, that any sort of kid glove treatment towards Germany or Germans was seen as being pro-Nazi or pro-Germany. And so much so that apparently some in the Third Reich actually kind of like Lifeboat because it shows a lot of the Americans fighting against each other and not being able to figure out what's going on. Whereas the German, he was a capable sailor. He knew what he was doing. He was smart. He kept water away from the rest of the group because he knew that he needed it to save himself. And so they were like, yeah, we can minimally edit this and release it to Nazi Germany for the public consumption. But that's sort of neither here nor there when you're dealing with propaganda and things like that. Authoritarian countries will sort of, edit however they see fit. But basically by the end of it, I was just like, yeah, I don't really agree with the thesis of this and kind of feel like this is all a little bit ridiculous. I imagine in 1944, things were probably a little bit different, but looking at it in 2024, it's a little silly.
Yeah, I didn't see this one, but one of our writers wrote a capsule review on it, and I haven't seen Lifeboat either, so I really don't have a whole lot of context to weigh in on, but I'll publish my writer's review. I expect to get that online this week, so it'll be up when this publishes. And yeah, it wasn't a glowing review, so I'll say that. SIFF. It's not a festival unless there's provocative content. Mm-hmm. They programmed aggro drift. So, you sometimes festivals put things out there just to put on display. This is kind of museum of art, and you get to make your own opinion about it. And so, yeah, I don't think I'll be seeing this one.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that you've seen it and that we've gotten your perspective on it.
Yeah, as a Hitchcock fanatic, there is definitely some very interesting stuff talking about the biographical details of his earlier career and talking about some of his lesser works that are not as well known. I thought that was very interesting. But yeah, overall, with a title that provocative, it does not lead, it does not match up to what you would expect. And especially, it just kind of falls apart where it was basically just like, well, did he? Well, not really. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, that's not a very satisfying answer to, spend 90 minutes of your time with.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
All right. So, Thomas, what is the last film you want to talk about?
Oh, right. I want to talk about, for the last film that I'm choosing, I'm going to talk about Bob Trevino Likes It. This film caught my attention because of the synopsis, which I'll read really quick. When her narcissistic father suddenly cuts her out of his life, Lily finds solace in Facebook, of all places, when she connects with and befriends a kind-hearted man who shares the name of her father. So essentially, Lily is trying desperately to have a father, to have a relationship with her father, and her father in this film just wants nothing to do with her, really, mm-hmm. and is not very receptive to wanting to build a healthy relationship with her, and very narcissistic as well. So yeah, she goes onto Facebook to try to connect with him on Facebook, and she finds another man with the name Bob Trevino, mm-hmm. and befriends him, and they build a very healthy relationship. And it's just kind of a film that follows that journey of how, these two connect and develop that relationship with each other. And it's very heartwarming. It's also semi-autobiographical. The director, Tracy Lehman, kind of based this story on her own experience. And it's, a very interesting story to have based on someone's life. It gets kind of heartbreaking in the sense that, like, someone has to go through that with their father. Mm-hmm. But I think that this movie really does do a good job building connections with characters and making us really fall in love with the characters that are here and how they interact with each other. This is an interesting film because it's getting so much praise from people. Mm-hmm. It won the South by Southwest Narrative Jury and Audience Awards. And here at SIFF, it actually just announced it was the first runner-up for the Golden Space Needle Award for Best Performance with Barbie Ferreira. And it was the second runner-up for the Golden Space Needle Award for Best Film with, of course, Tracy as the director. SFCS also gave it an honorable mention in their awards. So it's a film that is definitely something that can appeal to a lot of people. What I actually found interesting, I got to talk with Tracy, and one thing that I couldn't help but observe is it's its premiere at South by Southwest, and it's awesome that it won those awards. But it reminded me of another movie that's a very different film, and we addressed that. But it reminded me of another film that premiered at South by Southwest a couple years ago called I Love My Dad, which is also about a strained father-adult-child relationship that social media plays a role in. Again, very different film, but they both won the same awards only a couple years apart. So I had asked Tracy about that when I talked with her, and she said it came up, and that she's met James Morosini, who directed I Love My Dad, and very different films, but just a couple parallels that I couldn't help but observe. But this is a very heartwarming film. I think that I really particularly like how it ended. There's a moment at the end that just like really solidifies the emotional value of this film. And I also thought it was really funny. There were a couple times where jokes came up that I just wasn't expecting, and I really did this like embarrassing laugh out loud because it just caught me off guard how funny the joke was. So yeah. Yeah, and just a great cast, and I don't know. I guess ultimately what I'm saying is that this is a very approachable film. I can't wait for more people to see it. And I also, just congratulate Tracy on such a great feature debut film. And she's just such a wonderful person to talk to. So I really wish the best for her in her career after this, and of course Bob Trevino getting out in the world.
Yeah, and this is a movie that also stars John Leguizamo. I didn't get a chance to catch it. I want to watch it, but wasn't able to get a screener for it. And John Leguizamo was just one of those actors who, like, every once in a while you're reminded, like, man, you're a damn good actor. It's almost a shame that he doesn't get the quality of projects that he deserves, because he's been around for so long and he always turns in great work, but it's unfortunately just one of those actors who just doesn't get good parts most of the time.
Yeah, that's true. And sometimes you come across actors like that, but I think it's these kind of projects with Bob Trevino where you're reminded, like, oh yeah, you're a really good actor.
Yeah.
And it's nice that kind of talent can be utilized in a project like this to really bolster such a great film and a good story, and just have that support this kind of film.
Nice. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to check that out. That sounds like a very sort of like a typical sort of Sundance movie. I know you said it played at South by Southwest, but that sounds like a Sundance movie for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. Sundance played like Suncoast this year, right? Like it's kind of in line with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Those are 6 of the movies that we really saw. I don't know if you have any sort of honorable mentions of anything else that you saw. I saw a couple things not during the festival that were playing, stuff like Red Rooms, which I wrote a review for, which I absolutely adore. Nominated for a couple Canadian Screen Awards.
We could do an episode on Red Rooms. I cannot stop telling people to go see that film. I won't go on about it here, but like it's been a very interesting sleeper hit. Every festival I've seen it at, people come out of it saying, wow, this movie wasn't even on my radar, and it was really good.
Yeah. Red, White, and Brass, which I saw at the I'm blanking on what the film festival was called last year. It's an Indigenous film festival up in Canada, in Toronto. Cannot remember, but it's a Tongan film, I believe, and I think it was a runner-up for one of the awards here. So that was a kind of a fun, lighthearted one. The Evil Does Not Exist played here. I saw it last year at VIFF. I think that was my number 1 or number 2 movie from last year. I can't remember. Absolutely adored that film. But yeah, there's some really great stuff. Did you have any honorable mentions of stuff that you saw that you liked?
Yeah, a couple honorable mentions. I'm gonna shout out Seagrass, which played at VIFF, that I saw there and had the chance to talk with Meredith Hannah Brown about. That was just a really great BC based film. So I appreciated that at VIFF, and I'm glad that SIFF was able to screen it. Also going to shout out Subterranean, get a documentary in there, also BC film. I guess I'm just naming BC films now.
Love it.
No, but Subterranean, it was really interesting to hear about these caves that are in BC, with these teams exploring the deepest and the longest caves in Canada, which happen to be in BC. So shout out to that one as well. I got to talk with the producer. That'll be going online. And then I'll also shout out Sing Sing. I did get the chance to see that one at the closing night event, and it did just win the Golden Space Needle Audience Award, which is big and entirely deserving of it. Such a heartfelt film, so touching and so awesome to see. This story on film with this cast that had such great chemistry, and also are most of them were a part of this or are a part of this rehabilitation through arts program. And something, who was I talking with? I think I was talking with some colleagues during or after the award ceremony, where I was, something that I get concerned about when people play themselves, or when you get non-actors in films or non-film actors in movies, is that it can come off kind of hammy. It can come like it's not as natural as we expect performances in films to be. But Sing Sing, I mean, they're subjects that are in rehabilitation through arts. And so they have acting backgrounds in doing that, the theater work that they do. But I think that they were also really, really great movie actors.
Yeah.
And theater acting and movie acting, I think, are two very different things. But everybody in this movie was convincing as a movie actor. And I think that that's so compelling for getting this film out to the public and being a believable film and being a film that people want to engage with, and should. I think it's a great program that this movie is promoting, indirectly, I suppose, with rehabilitation through arts. And yeah, like I said, just a very heartfelt film. And Coleman Domingo, phenomenal as always.
Yeah.
So awesome to have him in this film. I can't wait for people to see it. I think it comes out in the next month or so.
Yeah, it's pretty soon.
Yeah. So the director, Greg, spacing on his last name, or how to pronounce
Quenders?
it. Something like that.
Yeah.
When he accepted the audience award, or the Golden Space Needle, he was talking about how this is kind of the last stop on their film festival or their promotional run up to release, and it's just kind of a really nice bookend to end that run on winning this award. And so yeah, I'm happy that it's getting the attention that it is, and can't wait for it to reach audiences.
Yeah, definitely one of those movies where every festival, there's always a couple movies that are like, yeah, it's playing at the festival, but it's going to be in theaters in like 2 weeks once the festival's over.
Yeah, there is that, right? And there's a few of those here. I mean, Evil Does Not Exist is one of them that opens in theaters on May 24th. And there's a couple. Dìdi comes out at the end of July. But I've always asserted that there are some films that just are best at a film festival.
Yeah.
Sing Sing in particular is just a closing night film.
Yeah.
It's so great to fill that space at a film festival, and so I'm really happy that SIFF recognized that and programmed it as the closing night film, and it just kind of like all the pieces just fell into the right place for that.
Nice. I'm very excited to see it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that wraps us up there. That's 6 movies that we saw and a bunch of honorable mentions. This was a great first SIFF for me. Hopefully it's not going to be the last one. But I really appreciate how welcoming and hospitable the Seattle film community is down here.
Yeah, we try to be.
You're all honorary Canadians anyways.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I'm up there enough. So
Well, Thomas, thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate you as well. Thank you.
Where can people find you? What you've got going on? Please tell the listeners all that.
Yeah, you can find my SIFF coverage at thisisforreal.com. For real, of course, spelled FORREEL. I'm mainly focused on interviews, as you may have heard throughout this conversation, just like dropping hints that like, hey, there's an interview for that. Those will all be published on my website and on our YouTube channel, but you can connect with us on social media at This Is For Real on Facebook and Twitter, or at thisisforreal_IG on Instagram and Threads. We also have a TikTok, so engage with that as well. All the social media, you'll find us there.
Well, I will make sure to link to everything that's already published by the time this episode goes up for people to check out.
Great. Awesome.
This has been a That Shelf podcast. Visit thatshelf.com for more great film discourse. Follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads at ContraZoomPod. Did you see anything at the Seattle International Film Festival? I would love to know. Send an email to ContraZoomPod@gmail.com. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there as well. And if you really like the show, consider tipping us on coffee. Thanks for checking us out.